Any matters that we need to take up?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
The defense is going to move for a discovery order, ordering SBI to turn over the information testified before the break about the quality control dates of when the typed statements were converted from notes to statements.
All right. And do you know what specific statements you wish to have those dates provided?
I was going to ask for all of the 11As generated as a part of discovery, the dates that I assume if there is a computer control system that it could generate a report. I know the state has indicated it was not given to them, so that's
Right.
why I'm asking for your order to SBI to the 11As tendered into discovery, which would represent typed statements for witnesses. I would like the dates that they were converted from notes to statements.
All right. Ms. Latour, do you have a position on that?
As I told Mr. Bradsher, that is between him and the SBI is what they can and can't provide. I was not provided with any of those statements. So.
All right. That's fine. I'll sign an order to that effect.
Yes, sir.
It probably would be helpful to have something in writing and as specific as you just said, any 11As that were provided in discovery in connection with this case. And you're looking for the date they were typed. You know the date of the interview, presumably.
Yes, Your Honor, that's included on the 11A.
And so you're looking for the day they were typed.
Yes, Your Honor, converted from notes to a typed statement.
Right. Okay. I think that's specific enough, but it would be helpful to have a signed order that I could then, that you could then transmit to the SBI.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Very good. Anything else? Anything else, Mr. Latour?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Very good. Let's bring jurors, please. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Further questions, Mr. Bradsher?
Yes, Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
Yes.
Agent Whitley, I previously had you identify, yes, Defendant's Exhibit 30, I believe, yes. And you have testified that that is the case identification sheet that would include the indexing, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, and you recognize that as a date of 9/21/2016, is that right?
That date is listed at the top.
And the information in the synopsis on Defendant's Exhibit 30, that would be something you would have typed in as your synopsis of the case to be investigated, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Move Defendant's 30 into evidence.
It's allowed.
And may I publish to the jury?
Yes, sir, if you'll hand that to the bailiff. All right, Mr. Bradsher?
Yes, Your Honor, may I ask a few questions on that document before we collect them?
Yes, sir.
All right, may I approach the witness?
Yes, sir.
Agent Whitley, before the break, you had made a statement that at certain points, a supervisor will call you and make changes to this document, Defendant's Exhibit 30. Is that right?
Yes.
All right. So this document, as the jury is looking at it now, Defendant's Exhibit 30, is this how it would have appeared when you opened the case August 3rd, or do you know?
Well, first of all, I'm not sure I opened it on August 3rd. Normally, that date corresponds to when you would open it.
Okay.
Yes, in general, it would look like that, with the exception of the additional index subjects and let me
Sure.
It's kind of hard to answer that question. All I can really say is it would have looked different.
Okay. Whenever you originally typed it in, it would have looked different. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And is that printed out at any point, or are you typing it into a computer system?
I would input it into a computer system.
All right. So in terms of how it looked, whatever date you initially put this information in, is there some quality control system that exists that could explain that?
I don't know.
They could show how the document looked initially?
I don't know. And actually, when I input the information in, it actually does not look like this. So
Okay.
I don't know.
So you said that a supervisor at some point called you and added,
I believe that I indexed either Cindy initially by herself, or maybe I indexed everyone. I just don't remember. But I remember Kay Perry calling me and telling me that I needed to make some change.
all right? Do you recall when, now Kay Perry, if you could tell the jury, that would have been your supervisor with regards to this investigation, is that right?
That's correct. During that time frame.
Okay, and at some point after, well, don't let me put words in your mouth, the date of Defendant's Exhibit 30 is September 21st.
That's correct.
Do you know if Kay Perry would have called you before or after this date?
I don't.
Okay, but you do recall a call from Kay Perry saying to change?
Well, I don't know if it was a call or an email or
Okay.
if I saw him in person. I just seem to remember interacting with my supervisor.
All right. Now, you said that it may look different from what you first put it in. How about the synopsis that the jury's just read? The facts that are set forth all the way to the end, is all of that as it appeared on September 21st? Because there's a date up here.
I don't know. I don't know.
Do you believe anything else was added in the synopsis on September 21st?
I don't know.
Okay. Is it documented anywhere that you know of what date Kay Perry would have called you and asked you to make changes to what the jury is looking at as Defendant's Exhibit 30?
I do not recall whether there's documentation of it or not.
All right. You recalled it happened, but do you know the specifics of what you were directed to do?
I really don't. I just remember that I had to make a change.
Okay. Now, on Defendant's 30 that the jury's looking at, there is no index subject of Craig Blitzer, is it?
No, sir.
All right. The scope of the investigation that we've talked about from the beginning of this morning from Judge Crosswhite was the Cindy Blitzer employment and hours working versus what she was putting in Beacon. Is that right?
That's correct.
And as a part of the investigation, you've told the jury about 2 interviews on August 29th that go beyond that and talk about categories of issues with regards to Rockingham DA employees taking classes for Cindy Blitzer. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. But as of September 21st, Craig Blitzer is still not an index subject within this authorized Judge Crosswhite investigation, is he?
No, sir.
Okay. So when you called Craig Blitzer to interview him, do you believe you said to him anything about being the subject of an investigation?
I don't believe I think I could have spoken with him very briefly, and then he said he was going to call me back. At least that's the way I remember it. And I believe I ended up getting a call back from Mike Grace, who represented himself as Craig's attorney.
All right. Have you had a chance during the break to look at the August or September letter from Judge Crosswhite as to the scope of the investigation?
No, sir, I don't have it with me.
All right. And in December of 2016, there was another letter from Judge Crosswhite sent to the Attorney General's office, wasn't there?
Yes, I believe so, but I don't know the specifics of his letter to the AG's office.
All right. You have not seen that letter?
I don't believe so.
All right. And then there was another Judge Crosswhite letter in 2017 with regards to this investigation to Lauren Freeman. Isn't that right?
I'm not aware of that correspondence.
So as you sit here now in front of the jury, you agree you have seen the initial requestor letter from Judge Crosswhite
Yes, sir.
in August or September of 2016. Is that right?
It was, yes.
But you do not recall seeing the other two letters.
I don't. That doesn't mean I didn't see them, but I don't recall seeing them.
Do you recall if you added either yourself or at the request of your supervisor within this investigation, Craig Blitzer as an indexed subject of the investigation?
I believe he was at some point, yes.
And do you recall when?
No, sir, I don't.
All right. So let's get back to the sequence of events then. The jury is looking at this defendant's Exhibit 30. Do you remember after September 21st when you would have made another change to this document?
No.
Okay. Do you know of any way that we can see how this document originally looked before September 21st, 2016?
I don't know.
Okay. Your Honor, that's all my questions with that document. If you want to collect, or I can leave them there. Whatever you say.
It's fine. We'll collect it the next break.
Yes, Your Honor. All right. So after speaking with Holly McAdams, Gail Peed, and Luann Martin on September 6th, and me, who's your next interview?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Do you recall talking to other members of my staff?
I do.
All right. Do you recall when you spoke with Jay Stoltz?
Yes, I do believe I spoke with him several days later.
All right, several days after September 6th.
I believe so.
All right. And where did you speak to Mr. Stoltz?
I believe it was in either the Caswell County DA's office or maybe the Caswell Sheriff's office, somewhere in that building.
Okay. And does September 9th sound right?
I don't recall the specific date, sir.
All right. Do you recall speaking to Jason Ramey again?
Yes, sir, I did speak with him again.
And do you recall talking to him on September 22nd?
I don't recall what day I spoke with him.
Okay. Throughout well, let me ask you this way. Would that be the answer for Jason Ramey throughout the fall, that you don't recall the specific times you talked to Jason Ramey?
That's correct.
All right. May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes.
Sorry, Madam Clerk, 131. Agent Whitley, I'm going to show you what I've marked collectively as Exhibit 31. You could take a moment just to look through it and see if it refreshes your recollection, and then I'm going to ask you a question.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
May I approach the witness?
Yes.
Now that you've had a chance to look at Defendant's Exhibit 31, isn't it true that you would have talked with Jason Ramey and reduced your conversation with him to writing on September 22nd?
That's correct.
And also September 26th?
That's correct.
And also October 3rd,
Yes, sir.
and also October 5th,
Yes, sir.
and also October 7th,
Yes, sir.
and also October 12th,
Yes, sir.
and also October 31st,
Yes, sir.
and also November 4th,
Yes, sir.
and also November 14th.
Yes, sir.
And all those interviews, discussions, information, you documented and put in type form, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And as of the last time you talked with Jason Ramey in this grouping of November 14th, the elected DA from Rockingham, Craig Blitzer, was still not an indexed subject of the investigation. Is that right?
That is probably correct, but I don't recall when we indexed Craig Blitzer.
So what I'd like for you to explain is, as you're doing these interviews, they go on the computer to the supervisor. Is that right?
That's correct.
And you said you recall at some point the supervisor making adjustments to this form the jury has. Is that right?
I recall him asking me to make an adjustment to it.
Okay. And then you go to Judge Crosswhite with findings from this investigation in December?
I don't recall the day we went to him, but we did go to him.
Okay. From the requester letter to the completion, you went and presented to Judge Crosswhite. Is that right?
Well, not to the completion of the investigation, but the completion up to that point.
Okay. Pursuant to the requester letter, the scope of the investigation that you told the jury.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And as you presented that to Judge Crosswhite, at that point, had your supervisor asked you to place Craig Blitzer as the index subject of the investigation?
I don't believe so.
All right. So with regards to District 9A, you did speak with Jay Stoltz, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And you spoke to Debbie Hallbrook, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And you went over to Rockingham and interviewed witnesses, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
You interviewed Melinda Richardson, the AA, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
And Spencer Morrow, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And you had already talked to Spencer Morrow August 29th, is that right?
Yes, sir.
But then you would have interviewed him again.
Yes, sir.
And you talked to Kyle Ambrose, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
And what was his position in Rockingham?
Kyle Ambrose was I don't recall his exact position off the top of my head. I apologize.
Okay. Erica Brandon, an ADA, you spoke with her, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. In fact, was there any employee of Rockingham County DA's office that you didn't speak with?
I don't know if we missed anyone or not. If we did, it would have been someone that had minimal contact with the office. It seemed like they had I just don't recall.
On Friday, correct me if I'm wrong, I recalled you testify that at the height of the media reports about this event, well, let me strike that question. Let me do it this way. Do you remember the first media report about this investigation?
No, sir, I don't.
Okay. And in terms of the testimony of Mr. Blitzer, you did review his affidavit and you took his statement, isn't that right?
I don't believe I reviewed his affidavit. I did take his statement.
Okay. And you heard his testimony?
Yes, sir.
All right. So, is it true that there were media reports about this event, this investigation, before it was taken to Judge Crosswhite?
Before the,
That was a
Work
bad question. Let me
yeah.
withdraw it and try again. You definitely talked to Judge Crosswhite in July. Let me say this. After you get the requester letter, were there media reports before you went back to Judge Crosswhite with information that led to the AG letter?
I don't recall.
Okay. Do you recall Mr. Blitzer testifying that while his office employees were being interviewed, that a member of the Greensboro News and Record was coming every time that there was an interview?
I remember him saying something similar to that, yes.
All right. You did those interviews, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
All right. Did you see that occur?
I did meet a member of the media on one of the days, yes.
All right. So SBI investigations are confidential, aren't they?
They are.
Okay. The media has a limited information that they can get if they seek it from the SBI, is that right?
Yes.
For example, isn't it true that they can get the name of the complainant?
I believe so.
And the Defendant's Exhibit 30 that the jury has in their hands, first line of the synopsis indicates Jason Ramey was the complainant to the SBI about this event. Isn't that right?
I'd like to look back at the
Okay.
exhibit.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes.
And again, what's been marked as Defendant's 30 that the jury has.
Yes, sir.
So it's in Defendant's Exhibit 30 that Jason Ramey was the complainant. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
We've just gone through, to refresh your memory, multiple contact with Jason Ramey.
Now that I think about it, I'm not exactly sure PIO has to release. I don't know if they have to release the complainant's name or not.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you for clarifying that. On Defendant's Exhibit 30, Jason Ramey was the complainant.
That's correct.
All right. And we just went through Defendant's Exhibit 31, multiple contacts between you and Jason Ramey that you documented in an 11A. Is that right?
Correct.
And you saw on at least one occasion that when you were going to do an interview of Rockingham County DA staff with this investigation, that media was present. Isn't that right?
That's correct.
And did you see it on other occasions?
I believe that's the only time that I saw someone connected with the media during interviews.
And isn't it true that at the time you were doing these Rockingham County DA's office interviews, there was no media article printed about this investigation, was it?
I don't know when the media articles began to come out in conjunction with the time frame of the interviews.
All right. Do you recall Greensboro News and Record doing its article October 28th of 2016?
I recall a series of articles. I really don't recall the dates that those articles came out.
Do you recall any article by any newspaper prior to October 28th, 2016 concerning this investigation?
I don't recall the dates that these articles came out.
All right. Do you recall any conversation with Jason Ramey concerning this investigation after November 14th, 2016?
I would have to look back through my notes to make sure.
All right, so let me ask you this. You and I talked after September 6th, didn't we?
I'm not sure.
We talked September 6th, is that right?
We did.
And then I called you in October, didn't I?
You did call me about a media inquiry that you had received, if that's the date you're talking about. I don't recall the date.
I understand you clarified your answer about what the SBI may release to the general public about a pending SBI investigation. Would you agree that in your role as agent investigating an SBI investigation of a state employee, that you would not reveal any information to the media, would you?
That is correct.
That is a part of your duties and responsibilities conducting a confidential SBI investigation, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And prior to my phone call to you, there was no media report about this investigation, was there?
Mr. Bradsher, I apologize, but I don't remember when the media reports began to come out.
All right. Mr. Latour did ask you on direct about me contacting you with regards to the media. So did you have a chance to look back at that statement?
No, sir, I have not looked back at that statement.
Isn't it true that on October 6th, that I called you to alert you that media had come to the Castle County District Attorney's Office asking about this investigation?
That sounds correct.
And isn't it true that I related to you that I did not address it, but went up to my senior resident Superior Court Judge's office, Judge Osmond Smith?
I don't specifically recall that part.
Do you recall me asking how the media would have knowledge of a confidential SBI investigation into a state employee of a district attorney's office?
Objection.
Sustained.
Do you recall the subject of why a confidential SBI investigation would be with the media?
I don't, but that doesn't mean that we didn't talk about that.
Right. I'm handing you what's been marked as Defense Exhibit 32. Do you recognize that as the statement that you typed up as a result of our phone call?
Yes, sir.
Before we get into that, let me ask you this. With regards to your training and your policies as given to you by the SBI, if you're investigating any state employee in the state of North Carolina under a SBI investigation which you have characterized as criminal, is that right?
I don't know which investigation you're talking about.
You have characterized Judge Crosswhite's investigation into Cindy Blitzer not working the hours she was putting in Beacon
Yes, sir. This was a criminal investigation.
as to, and she was a state employee, wasn't she?
She was.
And you're already aware that an allegation was made against another state employee of a similar type of going to school and getting paid for going to school wasn't true, right?
I know, yes.
And from the same complainant, you have this allegation that Cindy Blitzer is not working the hours she's in. And let me just follow up with that question and say, was that the allegation at that time that she was going to school and getting a paycheck and not working?
The allegation by Mr. Ramey?
As of October 6, 2016.
That was the allegation.
And that investigation of Ms. Blitzer, of that state employee, is confidential by law, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
And you did not disclose anything to the media, right?
The only thing I disclosed is the name and number for our public information officer.
So when I called you on October 6th and relayed to you the subject of my concern, without saying specifically what I said, you recall saying something to me?
I'm sure we talked, Mr. Bradsher. I don't recall.
Isn't it true that you asked me the name of the media outlet that was there that attempted to get a statement?
I could have asked you. I don't recall.
And in response to me, after I gave you an answer, isn't it true that you said, there is another media organization that has developed this story a lot farther along?
I very well could have. I don't recall.
So on October 6, 2016, what information did you have that another media organization had information about a confidential SBI investigation with regards to what Judge Crosswhite asked to be investigated, whether Cindy Blitzer was working the hours that she was reporting?
Well, first of all, I don't recall us having that conversation. It could have happened. If it did, I would probably read it on the internet like everyone else. And if I read it and it looked like it was developed, I may have told you that.
So are you saying here under oath as of October 6, 2016, you had no personal knowledge of another media organization that was getting information about this investigation that Judge Crosswhite authorized?
Mr. Bradsher, I don't remember the content of the conversation other than what I noted on this report. I don't remember it.
I understand that, but my question was, did you have knowledge of another media organization that was getting confidential information?
I don't remember if I said that to you. I can't verify a statement if I don't remember it.
Okay. I accept that answer. My question is beyond that. Whether you said it to me or not, on October 6, 2016, did you have information that a media organization had information from a confidential SBI investigation?
I don't know.
You don't know.
I don't know because I don't really remember when these media reports started coming out.
But you did hear testimony that Cindy and Greg Blitzer on each other's landline called my house once it hit in the media that this investigation with regards to her working the hours that she was reporting was all out in public view, right?
Yes, sir.
But isn't it true that it wasn't all out in public view until late October?
Mr. Bradsher, I don't remember when the media articles started hitting. I really don't.
Do you at least recall that the subject of our discussion was concern on my part about this? I'm trying to ask it generally, Your Honor.
I think it's been asked and answered.
All right. May I approach the witness?
Yes.
May I retrieve that exhibit, please?
Yes.
All right. Isn't it true that approximately 2:52 you documented that we had the phone call? Is that right?
Yes, sir, if that's what's written there.
All right. And this was on October 6th of 2016.
Yes, sir.
All right. And there are notes that go with the statement. Is that right?
I'm sure there are.
All right. Did you do anything as a result of that phone call on October 6th?
I know that I would have typed up that report. Other than that, I don't know.
All right. Well, had you interviewed everybody at Rockingham by that point?
I don't know. I don't know when the interviews concluded in Rockingham.
We spoke again on what date?
October 19th?
Right. Do you know if you had interviewed all of the witnesses in Rockingham by that point?
I don't.
Before the break, I had asked you if there were any policies or procedures. Well, let me ask it this way. Isn't it true before the break I was talking to you about investigations, the types of investigations and policies and procedures governing that? Is that right?
Yes, sir.
The SBI does have the authority to go investigate an employee of any state agency. Is that right?
I'm not sure that that's right the way you've said it.
All right. Under certain authority. Is that right?
I think that the SBI may have original jurisdiction in investigating certain types of crimes.
Okay.
That doesn't necessarily extend to a state employee, but
All right. Let me ask you this way. You have testified already that SBI has original jurisdiction over theft of state property.
I believe so, yes.
All right. And the way this original investigation was characterized, it was not reporting hours in Beacon that were reporting hours in Beacon that were not work.
That's correct.
All right. Did you consider that a theft of state property?
Yes, I suppose so.
So that is something SBI would have original jurisdiction throughout the state of North Carolina, wouldn't you?
Yes.
And if that allegation was against a state employee within any state agency in the state of North Carolina, would you have the authority to go investigate that?
You would have the authority to look into state property crimes, yes.
Okay. So my question is, with regards to the investigation of members of the district attorney's office in each judicial district, are there any policies or procedures specific to those state employees that you have to follow with regards to investigation?
None that I'm aware of.
Wouldn't be any different than an employee in another state agency. Is that right?
I don't quite follow that.
Okay. There are other state agencies in North Carolina.
Yes, sir. Oh, I see what you're saying. I apologize. Yes. Would you ask that one more time?
Yes, would it be the same of investigating any other state employee in any other state agency?
For a property crime?
Yes.
No, it would be the same.
Okay, the same. And the law in terms of confidentiality of that investigation would be the same.
I'm not sure what the law is on it, but I know that our policy is we don't talk with the media about an investigation.
Okay. So on October 19th, we meet again, don't we?
Yes, sir.
Would you agree that not everything that I said during that interview was documented in the statement?
That's probably true.
And yesterday, when I asked that same question about would you have written down everything that I said in your notes, you gave an explanation. You turned to the jury and you gave them an explanation on Friday. Do you recall what that was?
Not really, no.
Okay. Well, you were accompanied by another agent on that day, weren't you?
Yes, sir.
And isn't it true that you knew that I had been at the elected DA's conference in the 3 days prior to that meeting, didn't you?
I don't know that.
All right. Well, when we started that meeting, isn't it true that generally we had a conversation about that?
I,
I'm going to allow it, but again, caution you not to seek to introduce hearsay statements. If you wish to refresh his recollection, you may do so.
Yes, Your Honor. So, do you recall?
I don't. If you have something that would refresh my memory, that would be helpful.
Leading up to that, other than my phone call and seeing the media come to these interviews, did you have any other information that confidential information was being given to the media?
No, I didn't have any concrete information that information was being given to the media, but I assumed that they were receiving information.
Right. As of the October 19th, 2016, had you researched or had you been advised of the elected DA's responsibility in each judicial district to their employees in the investigation of this nature?
No, sir.
The elected district attorney is the constitutional officer of each judicial district, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And you said in other cases, that's the person you would go and talk to about the investigation, is that right?
That's correct.
And the elected district attorney not only has duties related to the prosecution of crimes, but also is the hiring authority in each judicial district, isn't that right?
That's correct.
And state employees, you do know from your training, do have certain privacy rights that are set forth by statute, isn't that right?
I'm sure they do.
In fact, as a part of this investigation, when you went and saw Ms. Tant, who's testified here, she could only give you a certain amount of information, isn't that right, without a court order or a search warrant?
That's correct.
All right. And governed by statute and other laws with regards to a state employee's rights to certain privacy with regards to their employment and investigations. Isn't that right?
I didn't understand the question.
You knew from your training and experience that state employees had certain privacy rights allowed to them by law.
I don't know where I picked that up, but I am sure that I was aware of that, yes.
And are you aware of any specific policies, procedures, or duties with regards to the investigation of staff of the district attorney's office?
No, sir.
All right. But with regards to law enforcement, there is a separate set of policies, isn't there?
Objection.
Sustained.
Well, isn't it true that you testified earlier before the break that you could not go into another law enforcement agency and do an investigation,
That is correct.
even if it was criminal, right?
No, that we could do under certain conditions.
All right. So you could go investigate a member of law enforcement in another agency under certain conditions.
That's correct.
What would those conditions be?
If the case was an original jurisdiction case, or if someone like a district attorney requested us conduct the investigation.
And one of those original jurisdiction issues would be a theft from the state of North Carolina, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And your name was been marked as Defense Exhibit 32. You can take a moment to look at that. All right, did you type Defendant's Exhibit? I'm sorry.
I did.
Is this the same document you handed up a few minutes ago, or is this a new document?
Is it a new document?
It's 33 would be
Thank you.
the next number.
Your memo statement. This is Defendant's 33.
Yes, sir. That is the report that I typed of our interaction on October 19th.
And who was the other agent there with you?
At the time, SAC Eric Hooks,
All right. And SAC stands for,
special agent in charge.
all right, and your title at the time was?
I was assistant special agent in charge.
All right. And, can I see that? And
Yes, sir.
in terms of the date of that meeting, October 19th, 2016, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And the interview started at 10:30 in the morning? Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Haven't had a chance to read that now. Do you recollect the initial conversation between you and me with regards to where I had been the preceding 3 days?
I really don't remember that part.
All right. You relayed certain information to the prosecutor about the meeting as to things that I said to you. Did you include everything that I said to you?
I included everything that I could think of that would be pertinent to document that event.
All right. Well, isn't it true that you documented that I was interviewed at 10:30 by you at Bradsher's place of business, District Attorney's Office 9A, located at 105 South Main Street in Roxborough?
That's correct.
Isn't it true that you documented that Special Agent Hooks was also present during the interview?
That's correct.
Isn't it true that you documented Bradsher was interviewed as he is the elected district attorney for District 9A and employed Cindy Little Blitzer?
That's correct.
Isn't it true that you indicated this interview was scheduled as a follow-up interview to his Tuesday, September 6, 2016 interview?
That's correct.
Isn't it true that you documented Bradsher stated that he had spoken to Senior Resident Superior Court Judge Osmond Smith and 3 other elected district attorneys?
That's true.
And then isn't it true you documented Bradsher stated he also looked back at the commission ethics letter?
That's true.
Isn't it true more was said than that?
That is probably true also.
Well, as you sit here, could you tell the jury what else you recalled in the context of me talking with 3 other elected DAs and my senior resident Superior Court judge relating to you?
I'm sorry. Mr. Latour? Sustained.
Do you recall how much more I said that you didn't document about speaking with him?
I don't.
In looking through this report, I don't see the word Brady. Do you recall that
Objection,
subject?
and may we approach and/or be heard outside the presence of the jury.
Yes. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to go ahead and send you all on a lunch recess at this time while we discuss matters outside the jury's presence, and then we'll break for lunch as well. I'll ask you to come back at 2:15, which is slightly more than an hour and a half from now. Gather in the deliberation room at 2:15. Please recall all the instructions I've given you. Leave your notepads and the material that you have there at your chairs. And again, 2:15, gather in the deliberation room. Everyone else, please remain seated. All right, outside the presence of the jury. Mr. Latour, what's the basis of your objection, sir?
Your Honor, the basis of my objection is that based on what I know from the discovery and from discussions that the defendant has had with other individuals, is that what I believe he's about to attempt to elicit is a discussion that he had, a self-serving discussion that he had with the witness about Brady rules and his implication that the SBI has an obligation to seek out Brady material and follow up on any Brady leads that they're not in possession of, which is a misstatement of what the law is. My concern would be that if he goes down this line of questioning in front of the jury and misstates what the law is as it relates to the requirements, separate and apart from the hearsay aspects of it, it's an issue that seeks to confuse the ultimate function of this jury and what the ultimate law of the state of North Carolina is on that topic.
All right, Mr. Bradsher?
Yes, Your Honor, may I first approach and let the court review 33?
Yes, sir. Thank
All
you.
right, 33 represents what the investigator documented as the substance of the interview, and I'll be quiet while you read it.
All right.
All right. As the officer documented limited information about the exchange in terms of the conversation between him and myself, does reference speaking to my resident Superior Court judge as well as 3 other elected DAs. There is other information that the officer has left out concerning my concerns about the investigation, the obligations of Brady, my request in terms of recording interviews, and even observation about, I believe that the SBI should have the policy of recording interviews. I contend, Your Honor, where the state has presented this statement and a limited amount of the defendant's statements to, from my view, the jury has a mischaracterization of what was said. The Confrontation Clause of the United States Constitution should allow me to confront and cross-examine that statement, first of all, as incomplete, which he has generally said things were said that I didn't document, but to further confront and explain my concerns given to this investigator about the investigation, the way it was being handled, media, Brady obligations, etc. And that actually prompted responses from these agents, which indicated, and I think I've already said it in the opening, that Brady, this is an interesting academic conversation. And my affirmative statement to them that it was not academic, that Brady was the law, that gathering and documenting Brady exculpatory material was their duty. And at that time, I will contend to this court, my position, the facts have not ultimately been found, was that I was not a suspect, nor put on notice that I was a suspect. In fact, come to as a district attorney about an investigation of an employee in my office. It's already been revealed to the jury that this indexing of an index subject could have happened as late as September 21st. The agent has already conceded he doesn't recall saying to me that I was a subject. If you look at the end of the statement, even a statement to this agent that should you find that my employee engaged in any wrongdoing, I want to know the result. And further evidence that you haven't heard yet, they sent to me this document that the jury has seen on November 30th of 2016 in the SBI portal. So, Your Honor, confronting and cross-examining my comments to him, I understand the rule on defendant's self-serving statements, and I shouldn't be allowed to testify through this agent. But I am asking for some latitude under the United States Constitution Confrontation Clause and due process to at least be given enough latitude to unring the bell that the prosecutor has run to make it think that they just drove up there an hour and a half and then I canceled the appointment and didn't submit to an interview. That takes the meeting totally out of context, and I want to be able to explore that on cross-examination. I agree I should not misstate the law and that it be guiding the jury. You give them the law. But what I said and what they said in response to me during the course of this investigation is relevant as to, I mean, this prosecutor, extremely talented, I have no doubt will argue to the jury in closing that criminal intent is seldom proven by direct evidence, that you have to look at all of these circumstances surrounding things. The defendant has the right to confront and cross-examine things like this that will be used to try and show some type of criminal intent. And I just ask for that latitude within the court's discretion to address that concern.
Well, I think the first question is does this witness have any recollection of any of these things that you're saying? And so one issue would be how detailed a question you might ask that would then, like you say, a bell that could not be unrung if you ask a question that say, didn't I say thus and such? And he says, well, I don't remember. Then that's a problem just in the form of the question. He has already answered, for example, that what else do you recall in the context of me talking to the 3 other elected DAs and my senior resident court judge? And he said, relating to you. And you said, do you recall how much more I said that you didn't document about speaking with them? And he said, I don't. So he doesn't have a recollection of that subject matter that you're talking about right now. I agree with you that to the extent that he has a recollection of subject matters you discussed. Did you recall discussion about the media? Yes or no? Do you recall discussions about whether I'm a subject of the investigation? Yes or no? But to go beyond that, I think is something that if you choose to testify, that you'll have the opportunity to give your version of what you recall from that conversation, why you said it, what you said in detail, subject yourself to cross-examination. It can be done. But I think the first problem we have to get over is whether this agent has recollection other than what's in his report or his notes. And so if you want to conduct a brief voir dire about that, I'll be happy to hear that.
Thank you, Your
And
Honor.
we can at least cross that first threshold if he does have independent recollection of these subjects that you wish to ask about.
Thank you, Your Honor. Would you like me to proceed?
Yes, sir.
Agent Whitley, where I ended up when the jury was in, I used the word Brady. Do you recall that you and I and Agent Hooks had a discussion about my view on your obligations under Brady?
I recall in general that you did have some type of issue with the way we were doing the investigation. And I recall at some point, once you basically told us that you were not going to submit yourself to an interview, you and Mr. Hooks spoke. I don't remember exactly what you guys talked about, but at some point he did make some comment like, what did he say? I don't know. He made a comment to you. And I recall leaving and trying to write down everything I could remember from our interview. Some of the notes I would have taken in the interview with you, and then some I added as we walked out.
All right. Let me ask you this, to try and refresh your recollection. Do you recall me sitting behind the desk in Luann Martin's office and you seated across me where, similar to how you're seated now?
I remember us meeting in an office.
Do you recall Agent Hook seated over to your right?
I recall that he was with me.
And based on your recollection, you're saying here under oath, you never recall me talking about the obligations under Brady.
Mr. Bradsher, you very well could have. I don't know.
All right? Do you recall, as a part of that discussion, me saying that I believe that SBI agents should be recording interviews?
I remember that.
Okay? In fact, do you recall me saying that I was going to make it my mission to lobby the legislature to change the policy so that SBI had to record interviews?
I don't really remember how far we went into that, no.
All right? And do you recall us discussing my concerns about the investigation?
I remember in general you had concerns. I don't remember what they were.
Do you remember us talking about my concerns about confidential information going to the media?
I don't remember that part.
Do you recall conversations about information received from the other 3 elected DAs with regards to my duties as the elected district attorney with regards to my employees and this investigation?
I don't recall that. I just remember you saying that you had spoken with some other people and we documented that.
And where you put in the report that I'd gone back and looked at the Ethics Commission letter, do you think that's an accurate recollection, or do you recall anything else in terms of going and looking at the law as it regards to investigations and employees?
The only thing I can tell you is what I documented is my best idea of what you said that day, because I don't even recall that part.
All right. Do you recall the discussion about informing me of if you found that Ms. Blitzer did any wrongdoing?
Could I look at the document
Yeah, actually,
again? I apologize.
thought the judge. Yeah.
Yes, I recall you saying something along the lines of you respected the job we did, but you had a job to do as the employer. And you requested that if we determined Cindy Blitzer had done anything wrong, then you wanted the information shared with you as the employer.
And do you recall your response?
No.
Do you recall in the discussion asking about the investigation?
Me asking you about the investigation or you asking me about the investigation?
Me asking you.
I don't recall. It could have happened.
All right, I'll ask one more general, broad question. Do you recall anything that I relayed to you about talking with Judge? Well, let me ask it in 2 parts. First of all, in talking to my senior resident Superior Court judge.
I recall that you said you had spoken to him.
But any more explanation of what we talked about? Do you have any recollection of that?
No, sir, other than you said you spoke to 3 other elected district attorneys.
Do you recall us discussing
No, sir, I don't.
the responsibilities and duties of a district attorney with regards to this type of investigation,
I don't.
or with regards to their employees?
I don't. Other than you telling me that if it was determined she had done anything wrong, you wanted the information shared with you as the employer.
I guess the last question for the purpose of this hearing, Your Honor, is the policy different now with regards to recording interviews during this type of investigation?
No, sir, I don't believe it is.
All right. What did it change for?
When the statutory changes came about, I believe that's when it was changed. And at some point, our police shooting manual changed, and we were able to record certain interviews with police shooting witnesses, subjects.
All right, but it's, Your Honor, just so that I can make the argument, if I could ask one more question. It's still not the policy of the SBI to record material witnesses in the investigation of state employees in a district attorney's office. Is that right?
Not as a general rule, no.
But that rule does exist with regards to the investigation of law enforcement officers, doesn't it?
No, not unless it would be for some of these crimes we've talked about, or if it was a police shooting case.
And could you clarify what you mean by certain crimes?
Well, I would have to have the general statute in front of me, but there are certain crimes that the General Assembly has said law enforcement should record. Those are, in general, the higher level felonies.
All right. That's all for the voir dire, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you. Go ahead. And I have to tell you, I have a conference call at 1 o'clock, so I'll hear from you.
Just briefly, Your Honor, I would ask leave. I understand the court's direction about eliciting specific self-serving statements, but I would ask leave for court to at least address, as I have on voir dire, the general recollection of these topics.
What I would allow, based on what he does have a recollection on, is that I believe that it would be appropriate. He does recall that you had concerns about how the investigation was being handled, and I think that you should be entitled to elicit that in connection with this statement that you respected the job we do. He has a job to do as an employer. And I think that that context would be appropriate. But beyond that, I believe that it would, the only thing that he recalls out of all of the questions you ask is whether you discussed the discussion about recording interviews and the SBI's policy about that. You've already broached that subject, I think, with him maybe Friday. I think you've already asked him about that policy. He's already gone into that and explained that these interviews are not recorded, and that the interview, maybe you were just referring to the prior interview in your question, but that interview was not recorded. You can ask about the recording of this interview, and you can ask about whether there was a policy relating to that. But I think the general context that he recalls that you expressed concern about the way the investigation was being conducted would be something that you could inquire into in the general sense as a topic that was discussed.
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Latour, do you need to be heard further?
Not if the way the question is broached does not contain any of what his concerns were.
Right.
Merely that we discussed that I had concerns about the nature or the way the investigation was being conducted. Isn't that right?
Right.
But if you start getting into what he said, obviously I would want to object again, but no.
Mr. Bradsher.
No further argument other than to simply say, Your Honor, I respect the court's ruling, but I believe the constitutional right to confrontation allows more than what I'm being allowed to ask in fairness to confront what he said. I will abide by the court's ruling, but I simply object based on the federal protections given a defendant in the U.S. Constitution.
Right, and I would allow one follow-up question. I'm assuming that Agent Whitley's memory is not going to be refreshed over the lunch recess to any of these topics, and it's fine to follow up. I mean, for example, if you ask the question, do you recall discussion about the topic or a concern that my belief that the investigation was not being conducted properly, and if the answer to that is yes, as he testified previously, the follow-up question being, do you have a specific recollection as to any of the concerns I had, or specific concerns? And I assume the answer will be something along the lines other than what's documented in this report. No. I mean, that would be consistent to what I've heard thus far. So I would permit that follow-up question to see whether he has independent recollection of that. Now, if he does have recollection, then we come back to this issue of what you could ask.
Yes, sir.
And it may be nothing, but I suspect the answer will be the same as what he's just testified to on voir dire.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Okay, very good. Is there anything else we need to take up very briefly? Because I do need to get upstairs. For
No,
this.
Your Honor.
No, Your Honor.
Okay, then we'll be back at 2:15, I think is what we said.